When I unlocked my front door that night, I knew something was wrong before I even stepped inside. The porch light was on. I never leave it on. The lock turned too easily, like it had already given up. The door creaked open, and the sound echoed through the hallway in a way that made my stomach tighten. The air inside felt cold and still, like the house had been holding its breath. I took one step forward, then another, and stopped. The living room was empty. Not messy. Not rearranged. Empty. No couch. No TV. No rug. The faint outlines of furniture were still visible on the floor, pale shapes where life used to be. The walls looked wider, almost mocking, like they were showing off how much space had been taken from me. I didn't move. I just stood there, keys still in my hand, listening to the hum of silence. I walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator was there, but it wasn't mine. A cheaper model, dented on the side. The cabinets were open. Drawers pulled out like someone had searched in a hurry. I opened one. Nothing. I opened another. Still nothing. No plates. No glasses. No silverware. I laughed once under my breath, not because it was funny, but because it was so deliberate. So thorough. That's when I saw the note. It was taped to the wall beneath the ceiling fan, fluttering slightly like it was proud of itself. We needed it more than you did. You'll understand. Family. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from rage held so tightly it felt frozen. My heart didn't race. It slowed. That scared me more than panic ever could. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call the police. I stood there, in the house I'd worked 20 years to build, stripped bare by the people I loved most, and one thought settled into my chest like a final verdict. All right. You want to take everything? Then let's stop pretending this was ever about family. Because when blood crosses a line, it stops being family. And when someone shows you who they really are, you believe them. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I believed loyalty meant endurance. That love was proven by how much you were willing to carry without complaining. I learned that early, long before the house was empty and the note was taped to my wall. My name is Elena Morales, and for most of my life, I was the one everyone leaned on. I grew up in a small, noisy house where money was always tight and silence meant something was wrong. My father worked 2 jobs and still came home exhausted. My mother worried constantly. And my younger sister, Sophia, was the center of everything, loud, emotional, always needing something. When I was a child, I learned to step back. To give up the last piece. To say, it's fine, even when it wasn't. That habit followed me into adulthood. When my father died suddenly from a stroke, everything collapsed. One moment he was there. The next, the house felt hollow, like a sound had been cut off mid-note. My mother stopped functioning. Bills piled up. Letters went unopened. She cried in short bursts, then stared at walls for hours. Sophia was still in college then. 19 years old. Directionless. Always figuring things out. So I stepped forward without thinking. I moved back home. I took over the bills. I made phone calls. I filled out paperwork. I worked overtime and came home tired, but I never complained. Someone had to keep things standing. Everyone assumed it would be me. I postponed my own life quietly. No trips. No risks. No dreams that required leaving. When Sophia needed tuition help, I sent the money. When she changed majors, I sent more. When my mother forgot to pay something, I covered it before anyone noticed. "You're so strong," people said. What they meant was, "You don't ask for help." By the time I bought my own house years later, I'd already trained myself to believe that everything I owned was temporary. That nothing was really mine. That if family needed it, I would hand it over without hesitation. I didn't realize then that teaching people you'll always sacrifice teaches them something else too. It teaches them you can be taken from. And that lesson would come back to me in a way I never imagined. For a long time, I didn't question it. Helping became automatic, like breathing. I didn't sit down and decide to give. I just did. Money moved out of my account as naturally as it came in. Time disappeared. Boundaries never formed because no one ever asked for them. After my mother stabilized enough to function again, nothing really shifted. She leaned on me out of habit. Sophia leaned on me because she could. By then, I was working full-time at the hospital and picking up extra hours whenever they were available. I was tired in a quiet way, the kind that doesn't show on your face but settles into your bones. Still, every request came with a familiar sentence. Just until things get better. They never did. Sophia graduated eventually. Or said she did. She moved back home, then out, then back again. Every job she found was temporary, every boss unfair, every workplace toxic. Each time, I listened. Each time, I helped. When she met Marco, I was relieved. Finally, I thought, someone else would share the weight. Marco was charming in that easy, careless way. He talked about big plans, business ideas, fresh starts. He thanked me often at first, shook my hand, looked me in the eye. "You're a lifesaver," he'd say. I believed him. When they got engaged, Sophia cried in my kitchen. Not happy tears. Panicked ones. "We can't afford a real wedding," she said. "I don't want to start my marriage embarrassed." I didn't even ask how much. I paid for the venue, the dress, the catering. I told myself it was a one-time thing. A final push to get her on her feet. At the reception, while they danced under soft lights and music I'd chosen, people hugged me and whispered, "You're such an amazing sister." I smiled and nodded. A year later, they needed help with a down payment. "It's an investment," Sophia said. "We'll pay you back." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I signed the check. That was when something subtle shifted. The gratitude faded first. Sophia stopped saying thank you. Marco stopped making eye contact. Requests became expectations. When I hesitated, even for a second, Sophia's tone would sharpen. "You're acting weird," she'd say. "Why are you suddenly so careful with money?" The first time she borrowed something from my house, I didn't think twice. A blender. A set of chairs. Decorations just for a dinner party. They didn't come back. When I asked, Sophia laughed. "Relax. You're not going to miss it." Marco added, "You can afford to replace it." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because it told me how they saw me. Not as family. As a resource. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How Sophia looked around my house like she was shopping. How Marco talked about my job like it was an endless well. I didn't confront them yet. But for the first time in my life, a quiet thought surfaced. What happens if I stop? I didn't know the answer then. But they would show me soon enough. The first time I said no, the room went quiet. It wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no raised voices. Just a pause that lingered too long, like everyone was waiting for me to laugh and take it back. Sophia had been standing in my kitchen, turning a mug in her hands, casually mentioning that she needed my credit card for a few days to cover something unexpected. "No," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. Heavy. Final. She blinked. "What?" "I can't," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not doing that anymore." Marco looked up from his phone. "Anymore?" Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. Like I'd broken an unspoken agreement. Sophia's face shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Disbelief. "You're serious?" she asked. "Since when?" "Since now." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Wow. You've really changed." That was the moment I understood something important. I hadn't changed at all. They had just grown used to me never pushing back. After that, the distance came quickly. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped. Messages turned short, clipped, polite in a way that felt cold. At first, it hurt. I'd built my identity around being needed. When the need disappeared, it left a hollow space behind. I questioned myself constantly. Was I selfish? Petty? Ungrateful? But as weeks passed, something else happened. The quiet became peaceful. I started staying late at home, not out of exhaustion, but because I wanted to be there. I cooked meals without rushing. I slept better. I opened a separate savings account and, for the first time, didn't feel guilty watching it grow. That was when I decided to renovate the house. Nothing extravagant. Just thoughtful upgrades. A new couch that didn't sag. A refrigerator that actually worked. Cabinets that closed properly. Fresh paint that smelled like something clean and new. Every purchase felt symbolic. A choice. When the renovations were finished, the house felt different. Lighter. Like it finally belonged to me. I made the mistake of sharing that feeling. I called Sophia, trying to be generous. I'm replacing furniture. If you want the old stuff, it's yours. There was a pause. I heard her whisper something to Marco. Then laughter. Thanks, she said finally, but we don't want your leftovers. Leftovers. I sat in my newly finished living room after the call ended, staring at the blank television screen. For years, I'd been the safety net. The solution. The answer. Now, I was disposable. I should have seen what was coming next. But I thought the worst part was over. I thought the distance meant boundaries. I thought my house was safe. I didn't know yet that while I was learning how to protect my peace, they were learning how to take it. And they were already planning how. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I stayed late at work finishing reports that weren't even mine. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned that dull gray that makes streetlights flicker on early. The porch light was glowing. I slowed the car. I never left it on. The front door looked wrong before I reached it. The lock was bent, metal twisted like it had been forced with something heavy. My hands felt distant as I pushed the door open. The sound inside was wrong too. Empty houses don't echo like that unless they've been stripped. I stepped in. The living room was bare. Not rearranged. Not messy. Gone. No couch. No television. No rug. Pale rectangles on the floor showed where everything had been. The walls felt farther apart, like the house was embarrassed. I walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator was missing. Not broken. Not unplugged. Gone. Cabinet doors hung open. Drawers were pulled out and left that way. I opened one slowly. Nothing. I opened another. Still nothing. Not a single fork. That was the moment my chest tightened, not from shock, but recognition. This wasn't desperation. This was deliberate. Then I saw the note. It was taped to the wall at eye level, written in thick black marker. We needed it more than you did. You'll understand. No signature was needed. I stood there longer than I realized, reading the words again and again until they stopped looking like language and started looking like intent. A knock broke the silence. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. Her face was pale, her phone shaking in her hand. I saw them earlier, she said softly. Your sister and her husband. A truck. I thought you knew. She hesitated, then added, my cameras caught everything. That night, I sat on the bare floor and watched the footage alone. Sophia pointing. Marco lifting. Laughing. Loading my life into a truck like it was theirs. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. I waited. Because when people cross a line that cleanly, the only thing left to decide is how much you're willing to let them lose. And I already knew the answer. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I stayed late at work finishing reports that weren't even mine. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had turned that dull gray that makes streetlights flicker on early. The porch light was glowing. I slowed the car. I never left it on. The front door looked wrong before I reached it. The lock was bent, metal twisted like it had been forced with something heavy. My hands felt distant as I pushed the door open. The sound inside was wrong too. Empty houses don't echo like that unless they've been stripped. I stepped in. The living room was bare. Not rearranged. Not messy. Gone. No couch. No television. No rug. Pale rectangles on the floor showed where everything had been. The walls felt farther apart, like the house was embarrassed. I walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator was missing. Not broken. Not unplugged. Gone. Cabinet doors hung open. Drawers were pulled out and left that way. I opened one slowly. Nothing. I opened another. Still nothing. Not a single fork. That was the moment my chest tightened, not from shock, but recognition. This wasn't desperation. This was deliberate. Then I saw the note. It was taped to the wall at eye level, written in thick black marker. We needed it more than you did. You'll understand. No signature was needed. I stood there longer than I realized, reading the words again and again until they stopped looking like language and started looking like intent. A knock broke the silence. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. Her face was pale, her phone shaking in her hand. I saw them earlier, she said softly. Your sister and her husband. A truck. I thought you knew. She hesitated, then added, my cameras caught everything. That night, I sat on the bare floor and watched the footage alone. Sophia pointing. Marco lifting. Laughing. Loading my life into a truck like it was theirs. I didn't call them. I didn't confront them. I waited. Because when people cross a line that cleanly, the only thing left to decide is how much you're willing to let them lose. And I already knew the answer. After the police handled the immediate case, I met with my lawyer. I want to change my will, I said quietly. Remove Sophia and Marco completely. He blinked. Completely? Yes. I'm done. I've carried them long enough. They don't get to benefit from me anymore. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. Sophia. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Marco stood behind her, jaw tight, eyes calculating. Please, Sophia said, voice cracking. We've lost everything. We just want to make this right. I kept the door chain on. Just enough for it to hold. You already had the chance, I said. 3 days. That's all you got. She stepped forward, desperate. I'm pregnant, Elena. Don't you care about your child? Our baby. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't flinch. Congratulations. But that doesn't change what you did. Marco opened his mouth. Sophia cut him off. We needed help. You helped us all these years. Why now are you so heartless? I raised my voice for the first time. For 17 years, I paid for everything. Your tuition, your weddings, your apartments, your emergencies. I built your lives for you. And this is what I get in return. You stole from me. Broke into my home. Took what I earned and what was mine. That's not family. That's entitlement. Sophia's lips trembled. Marco's fists clenched. The air between us was sharp, like it could cut. Your choices have consequences, I said. I'm done being the solution for people who don't respect me. I closed the door slowly. Their voices begged from the other side, fading down the walkway. Then silence. I let it sink in. For the first time, no one was taking from me. No one was manipulating me. No one depended on me for their mistakes. I wasn't just safe. I was free. And freedom, I realized, isn't given. It's taken. Carefully. Quietly. Without hesitation. Because when people show you who they are, you don't get to look away. I didn't. After that day, everything changed. The house was restored. Furniture returned. Appliances reinstalled. Everything in its place. But it didn't feel the same, and it never would. This time, it was mine. No guilt. No obligation. No fear of being used. I installed a full security system. Cameras. Alarms. Motion sensors. Every possible safeguard. The technician finished his work and looked at me. No one's getting in here again, he said. I know, I replied, voice steady. For the first time in nearly 20 years, I sat in my living room and felt the air around me settle. The quiet wasn't empty. It was safe. My own. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about what I owed anyone. I was thinking about what came next. I poured a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and let myself breathe. Really breathe. The sunlight poured through the windows, golden and calm, and I realized I hadn't felt like this in decades, untouched by guilt, unburdened by expectation. 2 weeks later, I booked a trip. A real vacation. I hadn't taken one since my parents died. This time, there were no bills to cover for anyone else, no emergencies to manage, no favors to grant. Just me. Standing barefoot on the beach in Maui, wind warm against my skin, I watched the waves slide over the sand. The ocean stretched out like glass, endless and blue. I thought about the house, the note, the broken locks, the people who had once claimed to be family. 4 years, I had mistaken sacrifice for love, obligation for loyalty, and guilt for devotion. Now, I knew the truth. Family isn't blood. Family is respect. Family doesn't take what you've earned. Family doesn't teach you that your life exists to support theirs. I smiled, letting the salt air sting my eyes. For the first time in decades, it didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. And I understood something I should have understood long ago. Peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you claim. Something you protect. Something you fight for if you have to. I left the water, feeling the sand sink beneath my feet. Behind me, the waves erased every trace of the old life, the debts, the betrayals, the sleepless nights. Ahead, the resort lights glowed softly, warm and welcoming. A new chapter, entirely my own, waiting. I whispered to myself, smiling into the horizon, 3 days. That's all it took to see the truth. And this time, I walked forward without looking back.